Please welcome to the stage the fantastic Dulma Clark, founder of Vivo Barefoot and the Live Barefoot Foundation. We also have with us Jeanne de Kroon, social and environmental activist in the sustainability movement and founder of Zazie Vintage. Elena Goerlinga is a 19-year-old environmental and human rights advocate who grew up in the indigenous community of Sarayaku in the Ecuadorian Amazon and is known for its historic battle against the oil industry. Aisha Sadiak, founders of Polluters Out, who are fantastic at holding the big oil companies to task. Welcome. And finally, Shia Bastida, organizer of Fridays for Future, who are, as we all know, sensational at mobilizing young people worldwide to hold our governments to account. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for hosting us today. The Extreme crew has been fantastic organizing the day and the whole schedule. It hasn't been easy to come together from all different parts of the world. But yeah, I'm extremely honored to be even sitting with you all on the same stage. So the first question would be generally for the audience, please do tell us about your background and what brought you to COP. And we'll probably start with you, Helen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Elena. As you heard earlier, I come from an indigenous community called Sarayaku in the Ecuadorian Amazon. My people has been battling the oil industry since before I was born. So really my role here is just to follow the footsteps of my people and to make sure that the people that I have been fighting, that have always been in this fight, are actually represented and heard in spaces like COP. It's really, really important that people that actually are in the front lines are included in the discussions, because in the end, it's not just that our future is being negotiated, which is kind of funny, you know. We're here about the negotiations and how our future is being negotiated, but this negotiations is actually what is happening to our people right now, and not just only climate change, but actually what is causing climate change, the oil and, well, the fossil fuel industry. So these negotiations are actually negotiations about what is happening right now and what has been happening for decades to our people. So for me, it's really important that that is heard, and that's also why I'm not here alone. I'm here with many people from my community. I think we're about five youth from my community that are going to be attending COP, and it's really important that there is participation from communities like mine that have been there for decades fighting.
Shia, you've probably been to COP how many times before?
Just once.
Just once. Wow. Okay. Yeah. What's your expectation from COP this time? Any sort of like main message would you like to pass to Extreme audience?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to notice how adults talk about COPs. They say, "Oh, remember you from Copenhagen? Remember you from Paris?" Like the fact that they can remember each other from other COPs, and they talk about COPs as places. And this is, my second COP. It's Aisha's first COP. I don't know, Helena, is your second or third COP. And we can't just wait for the next COP. And next year in Egypt, we can't just be thinking about COPs in a way that are just kind of these symbolic places and moments where things are not actually happening. So my expectations for COP, they're very clear. Our youth demands are very clear. We want indigenous people to be represented. We want indigenous rights to be protected, and not only for these lands and people to be protected, but to be listened, for us to protect Mother Earth as well. And that conversation is not usually had. The reciprocal aspect of knowledge and ancient knowledge, sacred knowledge, we want governments to commit to divestment, to start investing in renewable energy, to keep the 1.5 degree target alive, and not only alive, but for that to be the bare minimum that we actually achieve. There is a massive difference between 1.5 degrees of warming and 2 degrees of warming. It's 4.5 billion people more who are going to be affected by water stress, 4.5 billion people more who are going to be affected by heat waves, 500 million people who are going to be subject to just direct impacts of the climate crisis. So these things are real. They're not just numbers for us. They're things that we are already seeing. And right now we're inheriting 1.1 degrees of warming to future generations if we stop now. And we're not talking about 1.5 as something that is 0.4 degrees away. And every fraction of a degree matters, and leaders are not really talking about that. We want climate justice to be at the center of decisions, because if the new world that we're building is founded on the influence of the fossil fuel industry and their interests are being included so strongly, how are we actually going to have a sustainable, resilient, safe, secure future? So there are a lot of things that we have to say, and obviously our demands have been fleshed out and made better throughout the time that we've been activists. I've been in this space at this capacity for about 3 years, and 3 years is a long time where we are still having the same conversations. I know that history, when I read history books, they talk about years as days, basically. Things happen very slowly. But we can't have that luxury at this point. So those are my expectations for COP.
Thank you very much. When you said that all the climate problems are real, I just wanted to say that I've been home for the first time in last 4 years to visit my family in Siberia and Russia, and I ended up in the middle of Siberian forest fires emergency. And basically, to be honest, I've never been, when you're hypothetically learning about stuff and you obviously care and all of that, it's completely different when you're actually in the middle of the emergency like that. When you have an anxiety attack, when you're really scared about your children, you've got, it's extremely, it's a real thing that's affecting real people. I don't know what's happening. Okay, apologies. Yeah, okay. Is it better? Thank you. So, Aisha, please tell us about your experience. And I've heard you speaking earlier, and a lot of things that, please share the audience about your road to COP.
So, hi. Can you guys hear me? I think my mic's not working.
Yeah, I think it needs to be slightly more.
Is my mic working now?
I don't think it's working.
Yeah, just keep talking. It's going to pick up.
Okay. My name's Aisha, and I wanted to actually start off with something that Helena said. I think it's quite ironic that we are talking about negotiations, because you can't negotiate with nature. You can't. And that's something that we, in parts of the world where, especially in the global north, I think we've developed this mindset of conquering, controlling, dealing with nature, when in fact, we need to learn how to live in harmony with it and as one. And these negotiations are happening, but the truth is you can't negotiate with the climate crisis. And we're reacting, we're not putting forward solutions that are taking into account what's going to happen next. We're not prepared. And because this is my first COP, I'm quite shocked at the greenwashing that's occurring. Helena and I started a group called Polluters Out in 2019. The main purpose of Polluters Out is to make the general public know who is funding the Conference of the Parties. It is quite mind-boggling to me that there are millions coming from Scottish Power, and British Petroleum and Shell and Chevron to host the conference, the biggest conference that's supposed to solve the climate crisis. There's a huge conflict of interest. So I think my role for the next 7 days is going to be calling out truth to power time and time again. I don't feel intimidated by doing it, but you asked me what's my story. It's taken a lot of time for me to articulate my story. There are multiple things that make me who I am, but one thing that runs throughout again and again, and I've realized, is there are names and addresses and people behind the climate crisis. It is not abstract. It is not just natural. Humans are causing it in very specific companies that humans are running. And they've affected my family. They've caused members of my family to die. They've caused members of people all over the Middle East to die. It is not a coincidence that from the US to Canada to the UK to Australia, we're seeing more conservatism. One wonders why governments are getting so ramped up about immigration and protecting borders. Well, guys, they know the climate crisis is coming. And they know it's going to be bad. And they don't want refugees washing up on their shores for all the damage that they've done. So we're making it more difficult for people to come to the global north. Nothing about the climate crisis is a solitary issue. Everything is connected.
Thank you. Everything is interconnected. One of the key messaging that we're trying to bring to COP today, or in the next 10 days, is about the interconnectedness of human health and nature. If you're not well yourself and you're not looking after your own well-being, it's very difficult to then connect to kind of try to care about the insects and the trees around you. Like, we need to move the narrative beyond the sort of a direct. I hope I'm not going to be controversial here, but moving all the conversation around carbon, for example, that's beyond. A lot of the problems we see today is all interconnected. How you earlier communicated very well to one of the journalists was around war and climate change, and I found it so beautiful. I never really thought that way, which was mind-opening. So thank you so much. Jin, thank you for being here, all the friends for many years. We share together ethical fashion background, in the footwear, in the ethical apparel. Please tell us about your journey to COP.
I wasn't expecting to go, but I think, there are so many lines here. I've been working alongside the UN Ethical Fashion Initiative, but also with the European Parliament on their legislation when it comes to sustainable fashion within the foreseeable future. And I think the main issue is that we are still functioning in a post-colonial supply chain where the fashion industry is the second biggest polluter. 80% of people in the fashion industry are women, although they only own 10% of global capital and 8% of land. Fashion is both land and labor, and what I've been seeing within the negotiations over and over and over again is that it's just a very few, mostly influenced by big corporates, that are making legislation that are not about people, but about supporting big companies that are already existing. So we're talking about recycled polyester, but we're not talking about the actual voices from the supply chain. So I think if I can bring anything to COP is to turn around and disrupt our post-colonial supply chain and actually start to listen to the women that know how to work with land, to know how to work in harmony with soil, that have ancestral practices alive, because there's a lot that we can learn from. In the end, we're in a crisis of connection. And when I would ask anybody in this room, what's your favorite piece in your wardrobe, it always has a great story. And we've shifted the gaze from the maker to the model, and therefore took away our inherent connection to anything that we wear. So if I can facilitate anything during this COP, it is to bring the focus back to the real superstars of the supply chain, to the women in the global south that are on the forefront of the climate crisis, and to make leaders listen to that.
Thank you. So I'm going to fire out 3 questions, and then you're free to respond to in any order you wish. 3 questions. So one is, what would be like one thing you hope to take out of COP? Second question is, there's quite a lot of young people watching Extreme Channel. What would be your one advice for how young people can connect to what we're talking about today? And third question would be, to keep going, to keep fighting. We're going to be in this space until the rest of our lives. What would be one thing you do to look after yourself? You can take any of these questions in any order and how you wish. Would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So this is a very hard question, I think, to think about what we can take out of COP, because I think we have high expectations for every COP, and every COP lets us down. I think the only COP where people have felt together and united has been COP21 with the Paris Agreement, because every country agreed, to listen to the IPCC report. Basically, maybe I'm getting my dates mixed up, but every country agreed on the fact that we have to address the climate crisis, and for this COP, this is the 5-year ambition deadline. And a lot of countries we know have already agreed upon what they're going to present at COP even before arriving to COP. And I think that takes out civil society from the conversation a lot, because if countries have come already with a predetermined set of things that they're going to do, and they're not actually here to have conversations with people and listen to them and increase their ambitions. In the main plenaries where all the world leaders are and all the negotiators are, we are not allowed to go there. Even it was such a hassle for youth, especially, to get accreditation, to find funding to come here, to get our visas, for those who had to get visas. And we are not allowed to talk to these people who are making decisions, who are negotiating our future. And that is just a disconnect about the purpose of COP, the purpose of bringing civil society together with government. So I think what I hope to see from COP is just an understanding of the vitality of sharing stories, the vitality of understanding that the climate crisis is not just data, it's also our lives. And when you tie storytelling to data, you actually make people understand the crisis in a different way. So I think that what we expect from COP is just actual ambition. We want the 1.5-degree target to be the thing that leaders, uphold. We want them to do everything possible for their country to stay in line with the 5.5-degree target. And we want for richer countries to increase the amount of money that they're putting into countries that, are at the front lines of the climate crisis.
What would be your wish for all the young people, millions of people watching today this channel?
I want young people to know that sometimes we don't see this as a space where we can be. We feel tokenized a lot. We feel like sometimes we're here just to say that there were youth present. But we do have that, the moral authority of representing future generations. And especially with Indigenous youth, we understand the importance of intergenerational dialogue. And it's been seen as divided, the old and the young, and it's been happening for many generations. The amount of times I see Gen Z be, picked up and kind of antagonized against, older generations is too many times. That shouldn't be the case. We don't want to be part of that narrative of pitting Gen Z against other generations. We want to be included in boards. We want to be included in decision making. We want to be seen as smart, capable people, not just people who scroll through social media all day on TikTok and all of those things. And these are tactics to getting the word out and people actually organize through these platforms. But we just really want people to know, and youth to know from all around the world, that we have to make our voices heard in a way that is more meaningful than what we have seen before.
Thank you. Helen, what's your one wish for COP? What would you like to take out? What's your message to the young people, and how do you keep going?
I think I've always said this, that we do not have the privilege of only caring about the climate crisis, but we also have to think about, oh, this is happening right now. We have mining companies coming in. We have an oil spill happening in the river. There's these double crises that are very connected, happening at all times. And in countries like mine, we don't really talk about it. In Ecuador, we don't really talk about it. There's an oil spill. There's no media is covering it. No one is talking about it. No one is even helping the people that are without water because this huge oil company just spilled some oil in their drinking water. So something that is really, really important to me is that we actually can start talking about what is causing the climate change.
Yeah.
What is causing climate change? Because yes, we can talk about emissions, we can talk about how global warming is happening, because we are seeing what is doing to different communities all around the world. We can see climate change right in my community, but we can also see what is causing climate change in my community. And that is something we do not talk about. We do not talk about the source of the entire issue. And I'm expecting at least the leaders of my country coming here and giving you very beautiful speeches, and it's going to sound great because they're going to tell you, oh, Ecuador is, have the Amazon rainforest and we're protecting biodiversity. They are not, we are. And I hope that we can really, start having a conversation about that, so we can go home and say, okay, that is what they're telling the other countries, that's what they're saying on international platforms, but this is what the reality looks like. So we can actually have a conversation about the root cause of climate change. I think it's super important, and what gives me hope, I guess it's really seeing, it's always been, seeing my people like every day overcoming struggles, and see that despite everything, we're able to continue. And I think that is also what keeps us going. The purpose of our purpose, which has always been saving our home, and it started off with saving our home, which is a small community of 1,200 people, and the same struggle that we have now is about the entire planet. Yeah.
So what would you ask from the global youth community, how they can help your work?
I think the easiest thing is always say, amplify, talk about it. Yeah. It's a very big part of that, the raising awareness. But I think just we need to shift the discussion also, the conversation also, to actually talk about what is causing this. What does these numbers actually look like on the ground? And I think because it's so easy to say oh, we're planting trees and we are carbon offsetting, all these things. It's very easy to say that and say that, oh, we're actually climate leaders and we're doing this and that. But what does that translate to in our communities? You offsetting, what does that mean for my community? People have no idea what that means. So I think that's also what keeps pushing these false solutions, because people accept that. We're comfortable with accepting that, oh, I'm doing something, and this is enough, and amplifying is enough. It's not enough. It's going to be a tough couple of years, I think, that we have coming, because we need to understand, we have to accept that it is not enough, and it is going to be really, really tough on people.
Yeah, thank you. Aisha, would you like to add?
Yeah, so Shea and Helena, they're both very articulate, and I find power from both of them. And so I have a very, very specific demand for COP, that Polluters Out, and also the COP coalition and youth and everybody in totality, in addition to the 1.5 degree demand. A conflict of interest policy with the polluters, with the fossil fuel industries. Not only should they not be allowed to fund and sponsor COP, they should not be editing the Paris Climate Agreement. They're making line edits to articles that are giving indigenous autonomy, that are giving people the right to sue them. They are taking out the language like fossil fuels. Do you know that the Paris Climate Agreement, this is something I've learned from Xie, does not even have the word fossil fuels anywhere inside of it? Rhetoric matters. And so our demand is, you want to have a conference that is about saving humanity, then stop having the villain involved in writing our ending. And you can support that in many ways, but the island nations, the nations that are being massively affected by the climate crisis, have been saying this for the past 28 years. It's the G7 nations, the United States, the UK, Australia, France, Germany, Italy, that keep saying no to signing this conflict of interest policy. In fact, I'd even go far in saying that every year, these are the same nations that are preventing progressive action from changing and robust climate policy, because it affects their revenue. Meanwhile, the Maldives will flood if we ignore the 1.5 degree demand. The island nations will flood. Pakistan this year reached 145 degrees Fahrenheit. I need you guys to understand what that means. At 125 degrees Fahrenheit, your body stops functioning. At 130, your organs collapse. At 135, you go into shock and you start melting from the inside. My country has an energy deficiency. We can't afford coal and we can't afford oil. So we don't have fans at 145 degrees Fahrenheit, let alone air conditioning. It is hotter outside than the mother's womb. Babies are dying on hospital beds. And it is beyond ridiculous to me that Helena, Xie, and I are sitting here saying again and again, you cannot collaborate with the fossil fuel industry. It will not work. So that's my demand, and I think that's my demand for COP. And Alok Sharma, if you're listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for very powerful words. I'm just like feeling very overwhelmed. I understand the topic is extremely complicated and there's lots of different narratives and we get bombarded by all sorts of media news and it's extremely, extremely overwhelming. But to try to bring it back to like let's try to ground ourselves here. And my probably last concluding round of question would be around how, since we're talking about climate and nature, what do you do to reconnect yourself with nature? What's your sort of directed daily practices on how do you reconnect to nature and yourself, to your own holistic being as a human?
Yeah, this is such a good one because I grew up in the global north and I still very much believe that we first colonized our own lands before we took this to the global south. There's no raw nature left in my country. Everything has been taken away by grass fields for agriculture. Cities are very filled with concrete, and I never was aware that I was so incredibly disconnected. Just like our ancestral practices are no longer there. So I think what I've been trying to do in my life is to come back more to nature, to have, even when it's just 5 minutes, to step with my feet in the grass, even if it's winter or summer, to ground, to have a little practice of gratitude for nature every day. I think there are so many interesting ways to integrate more nature into your life, and it is a practice and a reminder, especially when you live in a very disconnected place.
Do you have any practices that you like keeps you going?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to share that, one time I asked the question to a group of youth and I asked them, what would you say to world leaders? And one of them told me, why don't you ask them when was the point in which they stopped connecting with nature, stopped feeling that connection? And I think my answer to that question would be that
they were never raised to connect with nature in the first place. And so, it's very different from the way that I was brought up and that a lot of indigenous peoples were brought up, which is just growing up with that reciprocity and growing up with that connection with Mother Earth. And actually in Otomi, which is the language of the Otomi nation, is, in Otomi, the word for skin is the same as the word for the outer layer of the earth. So when you hurt the outer layer of the earth, you actually hurt yourself. And you see just in indigenous language how connected we are with the world. And that is a sensibility that we don't have all around the world. And we are not saying, to adopt indigenous practices everywhere, but at the very least, adopt indigenous philosophy, just that thinking, that spirituality that is a lot more grounded in the grounding principles of how we came to be as humanity. And a practice that keeps me going a lot is, really asking myself, what is my purpose? And I think that's a very hard question for all of us, because sometimes I want my purpose to be, just to be able to enjoy life, and I wanted to be a veterinarian before I heard about the climate crisis. And I can't be a veterinarian because we have to save the world, and that sounds very weird to say, and obviously we're not saying that, us 5 in this stage are going to do that, but I don't want those hopes and dreams to be taken away from us, and the ability to be able to imagine new worlds and possibilities for ourselves, because we have to fight the battles that should have been won a long time ago. So my advice for people who want to connect with nature is to actually, go outside and just give yourself a pause from the very fast-paced world in which we live in. And a lot of people say that we live in a time of the extremeness of the now, which is, news, scrolling, shopping, deadlines. But I actually think that we're not present enough, because we are not actually feeling the impacts that we're having on the world. So we have to be able to connect with that and process that into action. And action is very abstract, because right now I'm sitting, I'm speaking, I'm not saving anything. But there are people who have the ability to write legislation down that is going to protect the world. And we overlook that so often. We overlook the fact that people have the power to enact legislation that's going to limit air pollution, that's going to limit water pollution, that's going to limit land for the fossil fuel industry to come in and drill. Those are all things that can be written down and enforced. And both things have not been written down nor enforced. So these things that we're talking about are not abstract. And my biggest hope is that we stop talking about climate change as something that is abstract and big, because it's specific, it has results, and it has solutions.
I cannot agree more. Thank you so much. Thank you. So any remarks around how you could, what daily practices do you do to center yourself, and any practices around reconnection to nature?
Yeah, interesting question. I think that I was lucky enough to grow up in a place where that wasn't really an issue.
That's exactly similar to me.
Yeah, it's a funny question. But I think that's definitely the issue that we're having here. The society, the system that we live in is really based on not just exploiting nature, but exploiting people, and it's this vicious circle that goes on and on and on, and it really comes from a place of being very disconnected and of ignorance, of not knowing and not being able to feel. And I think that all these world leaders that are making decisions, it's not really gonna happen if they don't have this shift in their of minds, of understanding, of consciousness. Because we can push for policy, we can do this and that. Just look at the Paris Agreement. Every country signed. Everyone said, okay, we're gonna change. And what has it changed? Not really. And it's because there is no will of actually changing. And And it has to be, you know, for me, because I'm so passionate about saving where I grew up from, it's something that I do because I want to, I need to. It's something that I feel that my people has been working for generations and generations. If you ask a politician why they're fighting for it, they have actually no idea, because they can look at the numbers, they can, look at the statistics, but they're not actually understanding the reality of it, and that is a sort of disconnection. And I think something that, you know, was taught to us in my community, and that we live with every day, and we take this into account in every decision that we make every day, which is also very important, that right now that we are living in the climate crisis, we need to keep in mind that, okay, we are living with the climate crisis. Every decision I make, I have to take into account that. And that also goes for politicians in policymaking, that every decision on every level, local, regional, national, international, has to be considering and taking into account the climate crisis. Anyways, but yeah, in my community, we grow up with this vision of not just in my community, in Domingo's community over here, in the Amazon, and all indigenous communities, with that nature is not something that we're opposite to, rather that's something that we are a part of. But not only a part of, nature is something that is living and that we're coexisting with. So for me, you know, Ecuador is one of the first countries to have the nature's rights in the Constitution. And for a lot of people outside, it's like, oh, what is this? Why should nature have rights? We don't really understand that. And what it basically means is that, you know, as humans have rights, nature should also have rights, because there are beings there, even though from a Western perspective it's really hard to understand what that being means. What does a waterfall being mean, or what does a mountain being mean? It's really hard to understand that if you never were taught that, if you were taught that everything is numbers and the regular things that you're taught in school. And I think we need to start to accept that there is so much beyond this. It's not just about going out and, you know, and having some fresh air in the forest on your hike. It's a lot more. It's this deeper consciousness. And I think a lot of people have a lot of fear of talking about this, because on a stage like this or at COP, that is something that is looked like, oh, you know, nonsense. But why is it that the people that actually are, you know, protecting huge ecosystems are the ones that are talking about this nonsense, have this feeling of this nonsense, you know? It's a very ugly way of you know, ridiculating people, and when we say like, oh, that does not really matter, but I think what they're saying does not matter is what actually is keeping the Amazon alive. So it goes much further than that. It's this entire, you know, shift of mind, of consciousness, and just, you know, about rights of nature and why it's actually so important, and why my community has been fighting to have our territories recognized as something that should have rights, is because with the Living Forest proposal, which talks about this, is because, you know, as humans have rights, we can have our differences. We do not always have to be, you know, we do not always agree on everything. But there is a limit of what you can do to another human being. There is a limit, and that is not, you know, that is not abstract. That is very clear what you can do to another person and what you cannot. And that should be the same thing with nature. There should never, ever, ever be accepted that there is an oil spill, that, you know, these fires are happening in Siberia. That is not okay. And if that is what people need to understand, if we need to put that into legislation for people to understand that, then so be it. So let's speak their language, then so be it. But please understand that there is a limit and we cannot cross that, you know.
Yeah, I cannot agree more than that, since I was trained in human rights law, and yeah, that's a baseline. And without changing the law, it's going to be very hard. Aisha, would you like to add any additional remarks?
Yeah, I have a two-part answer to that. First, this is something, again, it's taken time to articulate, but I can't express the pain we're in. Those of us who come from communities that we've watched dissipate before our own eyes, there is immense pain that runs through me every single day to get on the stage and communicate this with you. Shea and I were talking, and something, we were at TED, and she did a panel, was it? And I think she asked the people in the room, imagine 50 years from now, what do you see? And most people saw their children. 50 years from now, I'll be 60-ish years old. But all of this suffering that I witnessed and endured for oil, for the thing that's causing this mass crisis, has changed me mentally. There are bodies that were blown up, heads detached from bodies, limbs, for fossil fuel. Children are washing up on the shores of Germany, Syrian children. There are wars happening, affecting people who look like me, speak the same languages as me. And I sit here on the stage knowing that I can't do enough. And I'm motivated by guilt. That's the frank answer. I'm motivated by so much guilt because that could have just been me had my parents not won a lottery to come to the US. It's my family I have in the US is the only family I have. For 200 years, everybody comes from that area of Pakistan. So the pain is just so deep and immense, and it feels like there's a burden. And I'm asking people to bet on a tomorrow. I'm asking you guys to choose yourself and therefore invest in a tomorrow. And a little bit of it is naive. And a little bit of it is actually irrational because the science is telling us otherwise. If today we stopped our emissions and stayed at 1.1, there is still enough carbon in the air to get us to 1.5. People would still die. And that's half of the answer. The other half is love. We need to understand what is at stake. Everything that we've built since the dawn of time is at stake with the threatening of extinction. Every little poem you wrote, every painting you created, every cup of coffee that you made, from, if you're biblical, from Adam and Eve, and if you have other religious beliefs, everything is at stake because there will be nobody on the other end to witness our extinction. Who will lament us when we're gone? That is something that sits with me, and I can't believe that that is not scaring people. Humanity, the beauty of us, is our ability to create, leave memories. Memory is at stake, guys. And so, if there's anything that motivates you to take climate action, know that you are part of a miracle that is humanity. A miracle that is Earth. And today it is calling on you to protect it, and you need to heed the call. Because it might just be too late if you don't take action right now.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Aisha. It's beautifully said. I just sort of from my personal side, I would like to just. I'm so grateful for all the work that you do. As I'm just wearing tons of hats today, sitting here, and I don't even know where to start. Like as a human rights lawyer, or as an Indigenous person, or as a mother of 2 small children growing up, and I'm scared for their future. As a social entrepreneur, there's lots of things happening, but then I'm listening to your voices and meeting you today. I'm very sure that we're going to get it done. It's our generation that's we've got the voice, and we've got bright ideas and strong brains, so to say. So yeah, let's keep going, and the fight is on. But let's stay all connected. Let's stay grounded and be more human. Thank you. I think that I think we've got like 5 minutes for questions. If anyone from the audience wants to ask any questions.
I'd like to apologise for all the people of the older generations. I'd like to apologise to you girls because in the 90s at Sky TV we knew all the science, we were making programs about it. Nobody listened and everyone got exhausted by it. And we've handed the baton to you guys. But we could have stopped this 20 years ago. We could have reduced it all by 5 degrees and we wouldn't be sitting here right now. And unfortunately, the people in the buildings over there, they were all part of that. They all knew it. Everyone's known it. So I love what you guys are doing and keep doing it, but don't ask permission. Just do it. So will you all see yourselves? I know Dilma's got children. The others are a little too young yet to have children. Do you want to bring children into this world?
I can just quickly tell with children and myself, I'm 30 years old, but my husband got multiple sclerosis, so we didn't really have a choice to have children or not since he was going under chemotherapy. And we had to make a decision, and when you kind of confront the issues like that, you don't really deliberate much. But I'm hoping that I'm gonna do everything I can to give them a sort of green future. That's my oath to you all today. Thank you.
I see myself in a lot of places. I think if I have children or not is not really relevant to where I will be in 5 or 10 years. But I definitely see myself keep doing this work just because it was never really a choice. It's much of, I have this possibility to give a voice to my people. And I really want to keep doing that, and not just only me doing it, but be able to do it together with other peers from my community. Yeah.
I don't know. My friend Cassandra's in the room. She told me the other day that even bringing a child into the world is an act of rebellion. For some people, but because it's betting on a tomorrow, like I was suggesting. But my honest answer is I don't know. Because there's one thing to witness all of this happen, and then there's another active decision to bring an innocent being and also have them witness all of this. and the toll it will take is something I think about all the time. I have younger siblings, and and because I'm an immigrant here in the U.S., I've had the ability to almost be a parental figure, and there's so many things I want to protect them against. Like Helena and I were talking about this too. I have so much love for them. I would give my left leg to my brother if he needs it. And I don't know if I could witness like more pain for more people that I actively bring into the world. So, don't know.
I feel like just sitting here next to all of you, I feel like if the future generations have role models like you to look up to, then I feel like that's a pretty good reason for a new generation. And thank you for giving me that hope, that spark. I'm very honored to be here, and you're inspiring many generations to come. I hope one of my future babies too.
Can I add something? I think I've always seen myself as somebody who wants to be a mother. I do want to have children because I think that creating new life is part of humanity and part of who we are. And I've seen a lot of youth in my generation not want to do that because they don't want their children to witness what we are experiencing. And my parents have been involved in the climate movement since 1992, since the first Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. They had the choice of knowing what the stage of the world is and still bring me into the world. And because of the way that they raised me, because of the consciousness that they put inside of my being, I've been able to fight for Mother Earth and fight for my community and for future generations because of the way that my parents brought me up. So I think that I want to have children because I want to raise them. I want to be able to tell them how powerful they can be because my parents did that for me. And a lot of children today are not having those experiences, and a lot of us, a lot of people have not been raised with that connection. So I think that a condition for having children is being able to give them that spark of life and that fight for life and that fight for joy. And that is what keeps me going the most is wanting to protect that future and wanting to protect this present, because I don't want my children to not be able to go to the jungle in Mexico or to be able to go to the Volcán Villarrica, which is where my grandmother lives in Chile. I don't want my children to not experience the cold, the winters, and to be able to feel snow on their faces. Like, those experiences are the building blocks of the consciousness of humanity. And if we don't have those experiences, we are priving ourselves of what the meaning of life is. Because the meaning of life is not money, and the meaning of life is not power.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you.
Yo quiero felicitar a las señoritas, dar ánimo. Lo que están haciendo, están proyectando a buen camino.
I want to just congratulate you, young women, and to give you my encouragement and that you are on the correct path.
Yo sentía solo cuando estoy 30 años en proceso organizativo indígena. Ese entonces no había esta juventud, pero la naturaleza crea conciencia por sí solo. Y veo muchos jóvenes que están integrando a la defensa de nuestra madre tierra.
When I started my role as a activist for the earth, I felt very alone. That was 30 years ago. I felt very alone. But I see that Mother Earth has awoken the young generation and that it's coming through, and that there's so many more people today that are connected and are feeling this mission to defend the earth.
Ustedes van a tejer. Es importante la integración de la juventud del mundo. No solo mujeres, dualismo, hombre-mujer. Eso es la esperanza. Los mayores tenemos que acompañar e impulsar a esta juventud. Es la tarea de todos lo que hay que hacer. Uno es cambiar nuestro pensamiento. Dos, hacer con el corazón. Todo trabajo tenemos que hacer con corazón. Hacer con amor para que fluya este problema que tenemos.
So you are going to move forward, weaving all of your movements, connecting and becoming an integral part of civil society, the world. You, not just the women, you and the young men must be heard and must be listened to. But my advice is to move forward first with love in your hearts. Do everything from love, and do everything from with commitment and love, coming from a place of love. So you have to come from your heart so that the problem flows, so that the solutions flow from your heart.
Yo estoy tan lejos, ustedes me ven aquí. Estoy justo para dar este mensaje. Es hora de sentar todos. Ya no gobierno allá, indígenas allá, empresarios allá, no. Ya no hay tiempo. Es momento de sentar, tomar decisiones y hacer acciones. Todos juntos.
So I came to bring you this message, and he said earlier that he's here to support and stand as an older person with the young people and support your movements. And he said he's here because it's time to work together. We can't be isolated. The governments over here, the indigenous people here, and the rest of the society here. We don't have time for that kind of separation. We have to come together and find holistic solutions together.
Y ustedes merecen un buen premio desde ya. Espero que todos apoyemos a esta juventud y que ustedes sean ejemplares en el mundo. Muchas gracias.
You all deserve to be recognized and awarded for what you're doing, and that the young people are rising together, and it's great to see. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it time's up?
Unless anyone else has any further questions? Ladies, you have filled all of our consciousnesses, collective consciousnesses, with so much passion and a deep humility as well. And along with this gentleman here from Ecuador, I applaud you and I thank you so much for coming and bringing the voices of people from all across the world together onto this stage to share with all of you wherever you may be. Thank you so much.
Thank you.